What happens when the daughter everyone forgot becomes the woman an immortal refuses to lose? Tonight, we enter the frozen wilderness of northern Norway, winter of 1891, where 23-year-old Ingrid Larsen sits alone in an abandoned hunting cabin, waiting for the blizzard outside to claim her life. She is the forgotten daughter of a prosperous merchant family, not the eldest who inherited the business, not the beauty who married well, not the clever one who became a teacher. She's the quiet middle daughter who faded into background until her family simply stopped noticing her existence. When her father died last month, her siblings divided his estate among themselves, genuinely forgetting that Ingrid existed until the lawyer reminded them. Rather than acknowledge their oversight, they offered her a choice: accept a small pension and leave the family home immediately, or contest the will and destroy family harmony. Ingrid chose to leave, but with winter closing in and no employment prospects for a woman with no remarkable skills or connections, she found herself alone in this remote cabin with dwindling supplies and no realistic path to survival. She's been here 3 weeks, watching her food run out, feeling the cold seep deeper into her bones, accepting that she'll simply freeze to death in the next blizzard. Forgotten in life, forgotten in death, disappearing without anyone noticing she's gone. Tonight, as the worst storm of the season howls outside and the cabin's fire dies to embers because she's too weak to gather more wood, Ingrid makes peace with ending. She's written no farewell letters because there's no one who would read them. She's made no dramatic decisions because there's nothing dramatic about being forgotten. She simply sits wrapped in a thin blanket, watching snow pile against the windows, waiting for the cold to stop hurting. But someone senses her fading presence from miles away through the storm. Alaric Nordstrom, who isn't hunting but tracking a pull he cannot ignore. Because Alaric isn't human, he's a 4,000-year-old alpha vampire who can sense his destined mate regardless of distance or blizzard, and he's not going to let her freeze to death in an abandoned cabin just because her family was too blind to remember her existence. He doesn't care that she's forgotten by others. He will remember her. He doesn't care that she's given up on life. He will give her reasons to live. The forgotten daughter who waited to die is about to discover that true recognition comes from someone who crosses frozen wilderness to reach her, someone powerful enough to save her from ice and isolation, someone who will spend eternity ensuring she's never forgotten again. Subscribe now, because this story will prove that those forgotten by cruel families are often found by those who refuse to accept that anyone deserves to disappear unremembered. Ingrid Larsen sat in the abandoned hunting cabin, watching her breath create small clouds in the frigid air. The fire had died hours ago, or perhaps days. She'd lost track of time, and she no longer had the strength to venture into the blizzard outside for more wood. At 23, she was waiting to die. Not dramatically, not with anger or despair, but with quiet resignation that felt oddly appropriate for someone whose entire life had been defined by being overlooked. She'd been the forgotten daughter for as long as she could remember, not actively rejected like some tragic story, just unnoticed. Her older brother Henrik inherited their father's merchant business. Her older sister Astrid married a wealthy landowner. Her younger sister Freya became a teacher in Bergen. And Ingrid? Ingrid existed in the spaces between their accomplishments, so unremarkable that her own family genuinely forgot she was alive. The realization had come during the reading of her father's will last month. The lawyer had listed Henrik, Astrid, and Freya as sole heirs, dividing the estate 3 ways. When Ingrid had quietly pointed out that she existed too, her siblings had looked genuinely shocked. "Oh, Ingrid, we forgot you were there," Astrid had said with embarrassed laugh. "You're so quiet, you just fade into the background." They'd offered her a small pension, enough to live on if she was frugal, and suggested she leave the family home to avoid awkwardness. After all, the house now belonged to Henrik, and having a forgotten sister occupying a bedroom would be uncomfortable for everyone. Ingrid had accepted the pension and left, because what else could she do? Contest the will and force her siblings to remember the daughter they'd overlooked for 23 years? Force herself into a family that had never noticed her presence? She'd taken the pension, bought supplies, and retreated to this abandoned hunting cabin in the mountains. Property that had once belonged to her father, but was too remote and worthless to be included in the estate division. At least here, being alone was choice rather than consequence of being forgettable. But winter had come early and harsh. Her supplies had run out faster than anticipated. The isolation that had seemed peaceful in autumn felt deadly in deep winter. And Ingrid had realized, with peculiar clarity, that she was going to die here. Forgotten by her family, unmissed by anyone, disappearing without trace in a cabin no one knew she occupied. The strange thing was that she felt almost peaceful about it. Her entire life had been about not being noticed. Dying alone in a forgotten cabin felt thematically appropriate, a quiet ending to a quiet existence. She pulled the thin blanket tighter, though it provided little warmth against the cold seeping through every crack in the cabin walls. The blizzard outside had been raging for 2 days now, snow piling against the door and windows, transforming the cabin into a tomb of ice. "I'm sorry I wasn't memorable enough," she whispered to no one. "I tried to be worth noticing, but I suppose some people are just meant to fade away." "No one is meant to fade away," a male voice said from the darkness near the door. Ingrid's eyes snapped open. Through the dim light, she saw a figure standing in her cabin. A man who shouldn't be there. Couldn't be there because the door had been blocked by snow and she hadn't heard it open. But he was there anyway, and he was looking directly at her as if she was the only thing in the world worth seeing. Ingrid stared at the stranger, too cold and weak to feel appropriate fear. He was tall, striking, with pale features and dark hair that suggested he'd been traveling through the blizzard. Yet his expensive clothing showed no sign of snow or ice. "How did you get in here?" she asked, her voice hoarse from days without speaking. "The door is blocked by snow." "Blocked doors don't stop vampires," the stranger replied matter-of-factly, moving closer with fluid grace that seemed inhuman. "I'm Alaric Nordstrom, and I've been tracking you through the storm for hours, drawn by a presence I couldn't ignore. You're my destined mate, and you're freezing to death in this cabin because your family forgot you existed. I'm here to change both of those circumstances." "You're claiming to be a vampire?" Ingrid said slowly, wondering if hypothermia was causing hallucinations. "I am a vampire," Alaric confirmed, kneeling beside her so she could see his face clearly in the dim light. His eyes were unusual, silver blue that seemed to glow faintly. 4,000 years old, and I've spent those millennia learning to sense my destined mate regardless of distance or barriers. Ingrid, I felt you fading from miles away, felt your life force diminishing, your acceptance of death, your resignation to being forgotten. And I refused to accept it. So I crossed frozen wilderness through the worst blizzard in decades to reach you before the cold claimed you. Why would you do that for someone you've never met? Ingrid asked, confused by this stranger's intensity. Because you're not someone I've never met, Alaric corrected gently. You're my destined mate. The one person in all existence created to complement me perfectly. The mate bond means I recognize you, Ingrid. I sense your presence, your worth, your existence in ways your forgettable family never could. They may have overlooked you for 23 years, but I will remember you for eternity. My family didn't overlook me intentionally, Ingrid protested weakly. I'm just forgettable, unremarkable, easy to not notice. That's what they convinced you to believe, Alaric stated firmly. But Ingrid, I'm 4,000 years old. I've observed countless humans, and I can tell you with absolute certainty, no one is inherently forgettable. Your family's failure to notice you reflects their inattention, not any actual lack in you. You're not deficiently memorable. They're deficiently attentive. That's kind of you to say, Ingrid observed. But it doesn't change that I've spent my entire life being forgotten. My siblings genuinely didn't remember I existed when dividing our father's estate. That's not normal inattention. That's being so unremarkable that your own family erases you from memory. That's psychological abuse disguised as oversight, Alaric corrected sharply. Ingrid, healthy families don't forget their children exist. The fact that yours did suggests something profoundly wrong with them, not with you. You've internalized their failure as your own lack, but that's not accurate assessment. It's trauma response. I'm not traumatized, Ingrid insisted. I'm just forgotten. And now I'm dying, and that's fine because no one will notice anyway. I notice, Alaric stated with intensity that made her shiver, though whether from cold or his words, she couldn't tell. I see you, Ingrid. I remember you, and I absolutely will not let you freeze to death in this cabin because your family was too blind to recognize your worth. You're not dying tonight. You're beginning entirely new existence where being forgotten is impossible, because I will spend eternity ensuring you're seen, acknowledged, remembered, starting right now. He removed his heavy fur-lined cloak and wrapped it around her, the warmth almost painful against her frozen skin. Then he lifted her effortlessly, as if she weighed nothing. What are you doing? Ingrid asked weakly. Saving you from the ice, Alaric replied. Literally and metaphorically. Your family let you freeze and fade away. I'm bringing you back to life and warmth, and I'm making sure you never feel forgotten again. Alaric carried Ingrid through the blizzard with supernatural speed and strength that confirmed he wasn't human. The storm that would have killed any mortal attempting travel seemed to part around him. Snow and wind somehow less vicious in his presence. Ingrid drifted in and out of consciousness during the journey, aware only of warmth where she touched him, of movement through impossible cold, of being held by someone who acted as if she mattered. She woke in an elegant bedroom with a fire roaring in a massive hearth, warmth seeping back into her frozen limbs with painful tingles. Someone had changed her into a warm nightgown and piled blankets over her. You're awake. Alaric appeared in the doorway with a tray of hot soup. How do you feel? Like I almost froze to death, Ingrid replied hoarsely. Where am I? My estate, about 20 miles from that cabin, Alaric explained, settling into a chair beside the bed. You were severely hypothermic. Another few hours and you would have died. Your family's forgotten daughter would have become their erased daughter, dead in a cabin no one remembered she occupied. They would have noticed eventually, Ingrid protested weakly. When the pension checks stopped being cashed, would they? Alaric challenged. Or would they assume you'd moved somewhere else, changed banks, somehow existed in a way that didn't require their attention? Ingrid, your family forgot you existed even when you lived in the same house. Do you honestly believe they'd notice your death from 20 miles away? Ingrid had no response because he was right. Her siblings had genuinely forgotten she was alive. They wouldn't notice she was dead. That's not normal, is it? She asked quietly. Families aren't supposed to forget their children exist. No, Alaric confirmed gently. Families aren't supposed to forget. Siblings aren't supposed to divide estates without remembering all the children. Parents aren't supposed to fade daughters into background until they disappear. What happened to you is profoundly abnormal and deeply damaging, Ingrid. You've spent 23 years being psychologically erased, and you've internalized that erasure as being your fault, as being inherently forgettable rather than being forgotten by people who should have remembered you. I don't know how to be memorable, Ingrid admitted. I'm not beautiful like Astrid, not clever like Freya, not accomplished like Henrik. I'm just ordinary, easy to overlook. You're not ordinary, Alaric disagreed firmly. You survived 23 years of being systematically forgotten without becoming bitter or cruel. You accepted being erased rather than forcing yourself into family that didn't notice you. You chose isolation over conflict. Those are remarkable characteristics, Ingrid. They speak to strength and grace that your family was too blind to recognize. Or they speak to being so forgettable that even I don't remember why anyone should notice me, Ingrid countered. Then let me remember for you, Alaric suggested. Let me show you what it's like to be seen, acknowledged, remembered consistently. You've spent your entire life being forgotten. Spend some time being remembered, and then decide which feels more accurate. That you're inherently forgettable, or that your family was criminally inattentive. Why do you care? Ingrid asked. You don't know me. I'm just some frozen woman you found in a cabin. You're my destined mate who was waiting to die because she'd internalized 23 years of being forgotten, Alaric corrected. And I care because no one deserves to feel so erased that death seems preferable to continuing to exist unnoticed. I care because you matter, Ingrid, whether your family recognized that or not. And I'm going to prove it to you. Over the following weeks, as Ingrid recovered from her brush with death, Alaric methodically showed her what it felt like to be consistently noticed and remembered. He asked about her thoughts, her preferences, her experiences, and actually listened to her responses. He remembered details she mentioned in passing and referenced them in later conversations. He noticed when she was uncomfortable, tired, sad, happy, all the emotional states her family had overlooked for 23 years. You prefer tea to coffee, Alaric observed one morning, presenting her with precisely prepared tea without needing to ask. You mentioned that once, 3 days ago, I remembered. Such a small thing, remembering a beverage preference, but it made Ingrid's throat tight with emotion. Her family had served her coffee at breakfast for years, despite her politely mentioning multiple times that she preferred tea. They'd never remembered. You're crying, Alaric noted with concern. Did I do something wrong? No, Ingrid managed. You did something right. You remembered something I said. That's not something I'm accustomed to experiencing. That's devastating, Alaric stated quietly. Ingrid, remembering details about people we care about is basic human, or vampire, decency. The fact that experiencing it makes you cry reveals how profoundly your family failed you. You shouldn't be amazed that someone remembers your tea preference. You should be amazed if someone forgets it after being told. But the remembered details continued. Alaric noticed she favored her left side when sitting. He observed she preferred reading by windows rather than lamps. He recognized she became quiet when overwhelmed rather than vocal. He remembered everything, and he adapted his behavior accordingly, adjusting furniture arrangements, providing books, giving her space when you needed. "You're sitting by the window again," Alaric commented one afternoon, not as criticism, but as observation. "You do that often." "Do you prefer natural light for reading?" "I do," Ingrid confirmed, startled that he'd noticed such a minor habit. "But it's not important." "It's important because it matters to you," Alaric interrupted gently. "Ingrid, you've been trained to minimize yourself, to believe your preferences don't matter, your habits don't deserve accommodation, your existence doesn't require attention. But those beliefs are wrong. Your preferences do matter. You deserve to have your needs anticipated and met. You're allowed to exist in ways that require other people to notice and remember you." "My family would say I'm being demanding," Ingrid observed. "Your family forgot you existed," Alaric reminded her. "Their opinion on what constitutes demanding behavior is catastrophically unreliable. Ingrid, wanting people to remember your tea preference isn't demanding. Expecting family to notice when you're in the same room isn't demanding. Hoping siblings will remember you exist when dividing estates isn't demanding. Those are minimum standards of being treated as human rather than furniture." "I've been treated as furniture," Ingrid realized suddenly. "Haven't I? I've been the quiet thing in the background that everyone walks past without noticing. Useful sometimes, but never actually seen." "Yes," Alaric confirmed. "And that treatment was abusive, Ingrid. Subtle, perhaps, but abuse nonetheless. Your family psychologically erased you through systematic inattention. They trained you to believe you were forgettable rather than acknowledging they were forgetting. That's not your failure. It's theirs." "I don't know how to be unforgettable," Ingrid admitted. "You don't need to be unforgettable," Alaric replied. "You just need to be yourself, and you need people around you who actually pay attention. I pay attention, Ingrid. I see you. I remember you. And I'm going to keep proving that until you believe you're worth remembering." 3 months after Alaric saved her from the frozen cabin, Ingrid returned to confront her family. Not to seek reconciliation, but to make them acknowledge what they'd done. Her siblings received her in Henrik's drawing room, with expressions mixing surprise and discomfort, as if her appearance was mildly inconvenient. "Ingrid, we didn't expect to see you," Henrik said, the same tone he'd use for an unexpected vendor visit. "Is something wrong with the pension payments?" "The pension is fine," Ingrid replied, Alaric standing supportively beside her. "I'm here to discuss how you forgot I existed when dividing Father's estate." "We apologized for that oversight," Astrid said uncomfortably. "It was an honest mistake." "Honest mistakes happen once," Ingrid interrupted. "But you didn't forget me once. You forgot me constantly, systematically, for 23 years. You forgot to invite me to family gatherings. You forgot to ask my opinions. You forgot I was in rooms with you. You erased me so thoroughly that when Father died, you genuinely couldn't remember you had another sister. That's not honest mistake. That's sustained psychological abuse." "That's a harsh assessment," Freya protested. "We didn't abuse you, Ingrid. You were just quiet, easy to overlook." "No one is that easy to overlook," Alaric interjected with cold authority. "I'm Alaric Nordstrom, and I'm here to tell you that your treatment of Ingrid was catastrophically neglectful. Siblings don't forget siblings exist. Families don't erase daughters through inattention. What you did to Ingrid, making her so invisible that she accepted dying alone in a frozen cabin, because no one would notice she was gone. That's profound cruelty disguised as oversight. We didn't make her invisible, Henrik defended. Ingrid just never stood out. She never demanded attention. She shouldn't have to demand attention from her own family, Alaric cut him off sharply. Basic familial care includes noticing when children exist, remembering their presence, acknowledging their humanity. You three did none of that. You forgot Ingrid was alive, divided estates without her, and when confronted with your failure, you gave her money and told her to leave rather than acknowledging you'd psychologically erased your own sister for 23 years. What do you want from us? Astrid asked. An apology? We're sorry we overlooked you, Ingrid. But you have to admit, you made it easy to forget. Always so quiet, so unremarkable. Stop, Ingrid said firmly. Stop blaming me for your failure to pay attention. I wasn't unremarkable. You were inattentive. I wasn't forgettable. You were forgetting. The difference matters, and I'm done accepting responsibility for your neglect. You forgot I existed, and I almost died because of it. I waited to freeze in that cabin because I believed no one would notice I was gone. I was right. None of you would have noticed. That's not my fault. That's yours. You're being dramatic, Freya stated. We forgot to include you in the will. We corrected that oversight. What more do you want? I want you to acknowledge that forgetting your sister exists isn't normal oversight, Ingrid replied. That what you did to me was damaging and wrong. That I deserved better than being psychologically erased by my own family. But I'm not waiting for that acknowledgement anymore, because I've learned that my worth doesn't depend on whether you remember me. I exist whether you notice or not. I matter whether you acknowledge me or not. And I'm done letting your forgetting define my existence. She turned to leave, Alaric's presence steady and supportive beside her. Thank you, she whispered as they departed, for helping me see that being forgotten was their failure, not my fault. You were always worth remembering, Alaric replied. They were just too blind to look. 6 months after Alaric saved her from the ice, he raised the question of vampire transformation during one of their evening conversations. We need to discuss your long-term future, Alaric said carefully. You've been healing from 23 years of being systematically forgotten, experiencing consistent attention and recognition for the first time. But Ingrid, we must address practical questions. Do you want to remain human in a world that forgot you? Or are you interested in vampire transformation? What would transformation mean? Ingrid asked, pulse quickening. 3 days of intense pain as your body transforms into something supernatural, Alaric explained honestly. You'd gain abilities beyond human limitations: strength, speed, enhanced senses, immortality. You'd need to feed on blood regularly. But most relevant to your circumstances, you'd be entering vampire society where being remembered is guaranteed. Vampires live for thousands of years with perfect memory. We don't forget people exist. The systematic erasure you experienced as human would be impossible in vampire civilization. Because vampires have better memories? Ingrid asked. Because vampire society is small enough and long-lived enough that every member is known and tracked, Alaric clarified. We can't forget someone exists when we've known them for centuries. When new vampires are created, they're formally introduced to existing vampires. You'd be remembered, acknowledged, seen, not because you'd changed to become more memorable, but because the society itself is structured to prevent erasure. That sounds extraordinary, Ingrid admitted. To exist in civilization, where being forgotten is structurally impossible rather than depending on people choosing to remember me. But transformation is permanent, Alaric reminded her. And Ingrid, I need you to choose this for right reasons. Not to escape family that forgot you, not to gain guaranteed recognition, but because you genuinely want eternal life with me in vampire society. Your worth doesn't depend on transformation. You're already valuable as human. This choice should be about wanting vampire existence, not about fleeing human forgetting. How do I know the difference? Ingrid asked. How do I know whether I want transformation because I genuinely desire vampire existence, or because I'm desperate to exist somewhere I won't be forgotten? Take more time, Alaric suggested. Keep experiencing, being consistently remembered as human. If the desire for transformation persists even after you've healed from being forgotten, then you'll know it's genuine choice rather than escape response. There's no deadline, Ingrid. I've waited 4,000 years for my destined mate. I can wait longer for you to be certain. What if I choose to remain human? Ingrid asked carefully. Then I'll spend your mortal lifetime ensuring you're never forgotten, Alaric replied simply. And when you die naturally, I'll remember you for the remaining eternity. Your choice doesn't change my commitment, Ingrid. Whether you're human or vampire, I will see you, acknowledge you, remember you, always. No one has ever promised to remember me before, Ingrid whispered. That's devastating, Alaric stated quietly. Promising to remember people we love should be obvious, not extraordinary. But Ingrid, I'm making that promise explicitly because you need to hear it. I will remember you. Whether you transform or not, whether you stay with me or not, whether you choose vampire existence or human life, I will remember Ingrid Larson existed, mattered, deserved to be seen. You will never be forgotten by me. That's not conditional on transformation. That's absolute. Thank you, Ingrid said, tears streaming down her face. For remembering me when my own family forgot. For crossing frozen wilderness to save me. For showing me that being forgotten wasn't my fault. Thank you for everything. Thank you for surviving, Alaric replied. For enduring 23 years of erasure and still being capable of trust, growth, hope. That strength is remarkable. 1 year after Alaric saved her from the frozen cabin, Ingrid had transformed psychologically in ways that had nothing to do with vampire nature. She'd gone from believing she was forgettable to understanding she'd been systematically forgotten by people who should have remembered her. The real test came when she attended a social gathering in the nearby town, not hiding as invisible background figure, but participating as acknowledged guest. Miss Larson, a merchant's wife approached with polite smile. I don't believe we've met. Are you new to the region? I've been here a year, Ingrid replied, amazed at how steady her voice sounded. Before that, I lived with my family near Bergen. How lovely, the woman responded. And what brings you to our remote northern region? I needed to exist somewhere I could be seen, Ingrid answered honestly. My family had a habit of forgetting I existed. So I came north, found someone who remembers me, and I'm learning what it feels like to be consistently acknowledged. The woman blinked in surprise at such direct answer, but before she could respond, Alaric appeared with refreshments. You're being noticed, he observed quietly, handing her a cup of tea prepared exactly as she preferred. Remembered detail that still made her emotional. I am, Ingrid confirmed. It feels strange. Good, but strange. I keep expecting people to look through me, to forget I'm in the room. But they're actually seeing me, speaking to me, acknowledging my presence. It's what should be normal, but it feels miraculous after 23 years of being invisible. That's how it should always have been, Alaric stated. You were never too forgettable to notice. You were just surrounded by people who didn't pay attention. There's a crucial difference, and you're finally experiencing the difference firsthand. Throughout the gathering, Ingrid participated in conversations, shared opinions, existed as visible member of social group. People remembered her name, asked follow-up questions about things she'd mentioned, treated her as human being rather than forgettable background presence. How was it? Alaric asked as they returned to his estate. Exhausting, Ingrid admitted. But good exhausting. I had to remember that I'm allowed to speak, that my opinions matter, that people want to hear from me. I've spent 23 years training myself to be invisible. Learning to be visible requires conscious effort. That effort will become natural, Alaric assured her. The more you experience being seen, the less strange it will feel. Eventually, being acknowledged will be default rather than surprise. I hope so, Ingrid said, because I'm tired of being amazed every time someone remembers I exist. I want that to be normal, something I expect rather than something that makes me emotional. It will become normal, Alaric promised. You're retraining yourself to believe you're worth remembering. That takes time, but Ingrid, you're making remarkable progress. A year ago, you were waiting to die in a frozen cabin because you believed being forgotten was inevitable. Now you're attending social gatherings and expecting to be acknowledged. That's profound growth. I learned from you, Ingrid replied. You showed me that being forgotten wasn't my fault, that I deserved better than erasure, that my worth didn't depend on whether my family remembered me. You saved me from more than just ice, Alaric. You saved me from believing I deserved to be forgotten. You never deserved that, Alaric stated firmly. No one does. And I'm going to spend as long as necessary, mortal lifetime or eternal existence, proving that you're worth remembering, always. 18 months after Alaric saved her from the ice, Ingrid made her decision about transformation. She was 25 now, genuinely confident in her worth, and ready for whatever came next. I want transformation, she told Alaric one evening. Not because I'm fleeing family that forgot me, not because I'm desperate for guaranteed recognition, but because I've experienced human existence as forgotten daughter. I've healed from that erasure, and I'm ready to spend eternity with someone who crossed frozen wilderness to save me. I'm choosing this from strength, not desperation. Alaric studied her carefully. You're absolutely certain? You've achieved remarkable healing as human. You've proven to yourself that being forgotten reflected your family's failure rather than your own lack. You don't need vampire transformation to validate your worth anymore. Exactly, Ingrid confirmed. I'm not choosing transformation to become more memorable or to escape being forgotten. I'm choosing it to enhance who I already am, to spend eternity with you, developing supernatural abilities, existing in society where erasure is structurally impossible. I'm not running from anything. I'm running toward life I genuinely want. You understand that transformation doesn't guarantee you'll be remarkable or unforgettable, Alaric asked carefully. You'll still be yourself, just supernatural version. Vampire society will remember you exist because we track all members, but that's structural recognition rather than being individually memorable. Are you prepared to be ordinarily remembered rather than extraordinarily unforgettable? Yes, Ingrid replied firmly, because I've learned that ordinary recognition is enough. I don't need to be unforgettable. I just need to be remembered. I don't need to be remarkable. I just need to be seen. Transformation won't make me special, but it will place me in society where being forgotten is impossible. That's enough. That's extraordinarily healthy perspective, Alaric observed. Most humans who've struggled with being forgotten want transformation to make them memorable. You're accepting that you'll remain ordinarily yourself, just in society structured to prevent erasure. That suggests you've genuinely healed. When can we proceed? Ingrid asked. Whenever you want, Alaric replied. But I'd suggest 1 week. Give yourself time to be completely certain. Then, if you still want this, we'll proceed. The week passed with Ingrid growing more confident rather than less. She wasn't afraid of transformation or uncertain about remaining ordinary. She was excited, eager to become supernatural version of herself, ready to spend eternity with someone who'd shown her that being remembered was basic right rather than special achievement. I'm ready, she told Alaric on the appointed evening. I've spent 23 years being forgotten, 18 months learning I deserve to be remembered. Now I want to spend eternity existing in society where forgetting is structurally impossible. Transform me, Alaric. Make me your vampire mate. Let's face immortality together. One more thing, Alaric said seriously. After transformation, I'm going to keep remembering every detail about you. Not because vampire memory makes it easy, but because you deserve to be known completely. You've gone from being forgotten to being seen. I want to spend eternity reminding you that being remembered is your right, not special favor I'm granting. You matter, Ingrid. Always have, always will. Being remembered as right rather than favor, Ingrid repeated with smile. I like the sound of that. It's certainly better than waiting to freeze because no one would notice I was gone. All right, Alaric. I'm ready to become your vampire mate, who will never be forgotten again. Let's begin. The transformation process began with Alaric draining approximately half of Ingrid's blood, bringing her to death's threshold. Then came the venom, burning through her system with pain that consumed her awareness. 3 days of excruciating agony followed, every cell dying and resurrecting as something supernatural. But Ingrid had survived 23 years of psychological erasure, months of isolation waiting to freeze, a lifetime of being forgotten by people who should have remembered her. Physical pain felt almost manageable by comparison. What concerned her was whether transformation would somehow make her more memorable, more remarkable, more worthy of attention than she'd been as human. She didn't want to be changed into someone unforgettable. She wanted to remain herself, just recognized. The transformation completed on the 3rd day. The pain stopped abruptly, and Ingrid opened eyes that now saw with supernatural clarity. She could hear sounds at impossible distances, sense presences in ways she'd never imagined, feel strength flowing through her transformed body. But the first thing she noticed was that she still felt like herself. Not dramatically changed, not suddenly remarkable, just herself with supernatural enhancements. I'm still me, she said wonderingly, her vampire voice carrying slightly musical quality. I promised you would be, Alaric confirmed, appearing beside her with expression of reverence. You're still Ingrid, still quiet, still thoughtful, still the same person who survived being forgotten. Just supernatural version. Transformation doesn't erase who you are. It enhances what you already were. Ingrid studied herself with supernatural senses. She was stronger, faster, more aware, but fundamentally the same person. Not suddenly charismatic or unforgettable, just herself with enhanced capabilities. "I'm still ordinary," she observed, without disappointment or judgment. "Vampire transformation didn't make me remarkable." "You were never ordinary," Alaric disagreed gently. "But you're also not defined by being extraordinary. You're Ingrid, worth remembering not because you're unforgettable, but because you exist, and existing deserves acknowledgement. That's what you've learned, and that's what makes your perspective so healthy. You don't need to be remarkable to deserve recognition. You just need to be yourself." "And I'll be remembered," Ingrid stated with growing confidence. "Not because I'm suddenly memorable, but because vampire society tracks all members. Because forgetting is structurally impossible rather than depending on people choosing to pay attention." "Exactly," Alaric confirmed. "Welcome to civilization, where erasure doesn't happen, where being forgotten is impossible, where you'll be known, tracked, remembered, not as special achievement, but as basic structural reality." Alaric moved to stand before her, then took both her hands in his, holding her gently while maintaining eye contact. "You're remembered," he stated with profound sincerity. "By me, by vampire society, by everyone who will ever know you from this moment forward. You're not the forgotten daughter anymore, Ingrid. You're the remembered mate, the acknowledged vampire, the seen person who will never fade into invisibility again. That's not because transformation made you memorable. It's because you've entered civilization that doesn't forget, partnered with someone who pays attention, become part of community that tracks all members. You're remembered, Ingrid. Finally, permanently, completely." Ingrid felt tears streaming down her face, tears of relief and healing rather than pain or sadness. She'd spent 23 years being forgotten, 18 months learning she deserved to be remembered, and now eternity stretching ahead where forgetting was impossible. "Thank you," she whispered, "for crossing frozen wilderness to save me, for refusing to let me disappear, for showing me that being forgotten wasn't inevitable, for remembering me when my own family didn't. Thank you for everything." "Thank you for surviving," Alaric replied. "For waiting in that cabin long enough for me to reach you. For choosing to live rather than freeze. For trusting me enough to transform. My remembered, valued, eternally acknowledged Ingrid." A century after Ingrid's transformation, her advocacy work had influenced multiple human societies to improve how they treated overlooked family members. Not everywhere, not completely, but progress measured in thousands of lives improved. "You're changing human civilization," Alaric observed as Ingrid successfully convinced a family to acknowledge all their children, rather than focusing attention exclusively on accomplished siblings. That's extraordinary impact for someone who started as forgotten daughter her own family erased. "I'm preventing what happened to me from happening to others," Ingrid replied. "Every child who's consistently acknowledged, every sibling who's remembered during estate divisions, every family member who's seen rather than overlooked, that's victory over the erasure I survived. I can't undo 23 years of being forgotten, but I can ensure fewer people experience similar disappearance." Their relationship had deepened across decades into partnership that transcended mate bond. They complemented each other perfectly. He brought 4,000 years of perspective on human memory and attention. She brought personal experience with being forgotten that gave her unique insight into advocating for the overlooked. "Do you ever regret the years you spent being forgotten?" Alaric asked one evening, as they reflected on a century together. "I regret the pain and isolation," Ingrid admitted thoughtfully. "But I don't regret the journey itself." Those 23 years taught me empathy for others who feel invisible. They gave me motivation to advocate for systematic changes that prevent erasure. They made me understand viscerally what it means to be forgotten, which helps me recognize when others are experiencing similar dismissal. So no, I don't regret the path that led me here, though I wish it hadn't required waiting to freeze in an abandoned cabin. That's profound wisdom, Alaric observed. I learned it from you, Ingrid replied. You taught me that being forgotten reflected others' failure to pay attention rather than my own lack of memorability. That I deserved to be remembered not because I was remarkable, but because I existed. That recognition is basic right rather than special achievement. You crossed frozen wilderness to save me when my own family didn't remember I needed saving. That gift is more valuable than anything else you could have given me. You were always worth saving, Alaric said. Worth remembering, worth seeing, worth acknowledging. Your family was just too blind to recognize that. A century after her human death, vampire historians documented Ingrid's story. The forgotten daughter who waited to die became legendary vampire advocate who challenged how societies treated overlooked family members. They called her the Remembered One, the vampire who proved that those forgotten by families often become strongest advocates for preventing similar erasure. But Ingrid had simpler understanding. She'd been told that being forgettable was her fault, believed it for terrible years, then learned the truth, that being forgotten reflected others' failure to pay attention rather than her own lack of worth. That everyone deserved recognition regardless of whether they were remarkable. That the strongest families remember all their members, not just the accomplished ones. The forgotten daughter became the remembered advocate. The invisible child became the visible fighter. The woman who waited to freeze became the vampire who ensured others would be seen, acknowledged, remembered. And she had eternity to continue proving that those forgotten by cruel families are often found by those who refuse to accept that anyone deserves to disappear unremembered. Because they learned that being remembered is basic human right that requires only attention, not extraordinary memorability, and that the greatest gift anyone can give is consistent recognition that says, I see you, I acknowledge you, I remember you exist. She was his remembered, valued mate, and the vampire who'd crossed frozen wilderness to save her from ice and erasure would spend eternity ensuring she knew that the forgotten daughter had always deserved to be remembered, not as special achievement, but as fundamental right that should never have required supernatural intervention to guarantee.